How important is the sanctuary? Let me just mention a few very important things. The book of Daniel is seeped in sanctuary terminology. In fact, there's no way you can understand the book of Daniel without the sanctuary. Particularly chapter 8, where it speaks about a little horn that takes away the daily, and where it speaks about the sanctuary being cleansed, a reference to Leviticus chapter 16, what happened on the Day of Atonement. There's no way you can understand Daniel without understanding the sanctuary. Furthermore, the whole book of Hebrews, from beginning to end, is an illustration of what Jesus has accomplished in the sanctuary. There's no way that you can understand the book of Hebrews unless you understand the Old Testament Hebrew sanctuary, because the book of Hebrews is saturated with sanctuary terminology. The book of Psalms. There's no way that the book of Psalms can be understood independently of the feasts and of the sanctuary. You know, David was called what the Bible tells us, that he was skillful in playing the harp. He was a great musician. You can read that in 1 Samuel chapter 16 and verse 18. He was so proficient in playing the harp that the demons even fled when he was playing for King Saul. The Bible also tells us in 2 Samuel chapter 23 and verse 1 that David was called the sweet psalmist of Israel. He wrote 73 of the 150 Psalms. In fact, the book of Psalms was the hymnal of the sanctuary. Each psalm had a particular sanctuary setting, or the psalm was read during a particular Hebrew feast. Let me illustrate the point. You know, when Jesus met with his disciples in the upper room to institute the Lord's Supper, they sang Psalm 113 and 114. See, the Psalms were the hymnal of the sanctuary. And when the service was finished, when Jesus had instituted the Lord's Supper, they sang Psalm 115 through Psalm 118. Do you remember that it says in the Gospels that when they had sung the hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives? Well, what they sang was actually Psalm 115 through 118. Psalm 135 was sung at the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Psalm 29 and Psalm 132 were sung at Pentecost and at the Feast of Tabernacles. The book of Ruth was sung at the Feast of Pentecost because it has to do with the harvest. And Psalms 47, 68, 29, and 132 were sung at the Feast of Tabernacles. In other words, the Psalms help us understand the sanctuary and the Hebrew feasts because the Psalms were connected with the sanctuary service. In other words, the theme of the Psalms were connected with specific events that had to do with the Hebrew sanctuary. The book of Revelation cannot be understood without the Hebrew sanctuary. In fact, the book of Revelation is saturated with sanctuary terminology. Let's notice several examples. Notice Revelation chapter 5 and verse 6. Revelation chapter 5 and verse 6. It says there, "And I looked, and behold, in the midst of the throne and of the four living creatures, and in the midst of the elders, stood a lamb as though it had been slain." There were millions of lambs that were killed in the sanctuary service. It continues saying, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into all of the earth. The 7 candlesticks are mentioned in the book of Revelation. Notice Revelation chapter 1 and verses 12 and 13. It says there, "Then I turned to see the voice that spoke with me, and having turned, I saw 7 golden lampstands." See, there you have the holy place, ministry of Christ. "And in the midst of the 7 lampstands, one like the Son of Man, clothed with the garment down to the feet, and girded about the chest with a golden band." The altar of incense is in the book of Revelation. Notice Revelation chapter 8 and verses 3 through 5. It says there, Revelation 8 verses 3 through 5, "Then another angel, having a golden censer, came and stood at the altar. He was given much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all the saints upon the golden altar which was before the throne. And the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints ascended before God from the angel's hand." So notice you have the Lamb, you have the 7 candlesticks, you have the altar of incense, you also have the manna. Notice Revelation chapter 2 and verse 17. Revelation chapter 2 and verse 17. It says, "He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. To him who overcomes, I will give some of the hidden manna to eat." Do you know that the most holy place is also mentioned in the book of Revelation? Notice Revelation chapter 11 and verse 19. Revelation chapter 11 and verse 19. It says there, "Then the temple of God was opened" where? In heaven. "And the ark of His covenant was seen in His temple." In which temple? In the heavenly temple. Is there an ark in the heavenly temple? Most certainly. It says, "Then the temple of God was opened in heaven. The ark of His covenant was seen in His temple. And there were lightnings, noises, thundering, an earthquake, and great hail." In fact, we don't have the time right now to show this, but the book of Revelation follows the exact order of the Hebrew sanctuary. It goes from the people in the camp, to the Lamb, to the candlesticks, to the table of showbread, to the altar of incense, to the most holy place, and then to the cessation of intercession in the most holy place. In fact, let's read that. Revelation chapter 15 and verses 5 through 8. Do you know the time is coming when the service of the sanctuary is going to come to an end? And nobody's going to be able to enter the sanctuary by faith anymore. Probation will have closed. That is presented in Revelation 15 and verses 5 through 8. Notice, "After these things I looked, and behold, the temple of the tabernacle of the testimony in heaven was opened. And out of the temple came the 7 angels having the 7 plagues, clothed in pure bright linen, and having their chests girded with golden bands. Then one of the 4 living creatures gave to the 7 angels 7 golden bowls full of the wrath of God, who lives forever and ever." Now notice verse 8. "The temple was filled with smoke from the glory of God and from His power. And no one was able to enter the temple till the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were completed." Is the sanctuary service going to come to an end someday? Most certainly it will. The most holy place ministry of Christ will come to an end. And when it comes to an end, probation will close. A time of tribulation will come, the time of the plagues, and then Jesus will return in power and glory. The book of Revelation follows the exact order of the Hebrew sanctuary from beginning to end, which means that there's no way that we can understand the book of Revelation unless we understand the sanctuary. So we must understand the sanctuary to understand the Psalms, to understand the book of Revelation, to understand the book of Hebrews, to understand other portions of Scripture. The sanctuary is of critical importance for understanding Scripture.